Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now the other day was a beautiful day. I was spending some excellent time with my son talking about knives and giving him some tips and tricks on how to really get started carving. I mean, he's used some in the past, but we're starting to get kind of serious, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to overall get some good quality time with him, oversee him using his blades, and in that regard I figured, what the heck, let's get some knife time on and get some handle time myself. Now with that said, I have recently reviewed two knives from a company, TFK. This is the T7 and the Pico, two excellent blades from TFK, which is Tanev Family Knives. Now with that review, I was extremely impressed at these blades, and I decided I wanted to get my hands on the rest of their collection. So with that said, we're going to take a look today at another offering from TFK. This is the T4. This is in essence a moderately sized, I'd say, kind of bushcraft style knife. A Scandi ground D2 tool steel blade, has a 5/32 thick sharpened spine with overall a good number of features. Now this comes with a Kydex sheath. This has G10 handle scales, solid pins, and overall pretty good ergonomics. And if you're interested in seeing more and to see if this is a knife for you, do me a favor. Stay tuned. So I'm out here today, pretty nice morning. I got Brandon over there. What are you working on, buddy?
I don't know, I might make a spear.
A spear? He's using his Mora Craftline Pro S, which is the stainless version. And I thought I would get a little bit of work in today. So here I have my TFK T4. Just gonna give it a little bit of field use here now. I have this baton that I was kind of messing around with, but it's a little oversized and the handle isn't very comfortable, and I figured maybe I'll just carve this out a little bit, and it'll give me some handle time with this T4, see how it feels in my hand. Initial impression seems to have a pretty nice grind geometry. Now this is basically Scandi ground down to a it's zero ground, so there is no secondary bevel. So it is quite sharp and has a nice angle of attack. Now the spine is a reasonable thickness. I believe this is a 5/32 thick spine, so overall pretty decent thickness, but it's not overly thick, not like a 3/16 where you end up with kind of a funky grind angle for a Scandi. So this was pretty good in terms of the overall ability to find the edge, and obviously that Scandi grind is quite sharp. TFK seems to do a really nice job refining their edge. That's what I found on all their blades so far, is that they have a very nicely refined edge, so it is quite sharp right out of the box. Another thing to note is that on this particular model, on this T4, it does have a squared off spine, so it is just a touch sharp on your thumb, but I'm actually okay with that. It's not bothering me yet, but we'll see how that is after a good amount of use.
like most Scandies, this knife is trying to bite quite deep, so it takes a little bit of effort to keep this on top of the wood, just to take fine little slices. So this definitely has the tendency to want to bite, and that is, again, just the nature of a Scandi, and that's all right. You know, you got to just kind of understand that, get used to it, and then figure out how you're going to adapt to that. So, you know, I'm taking, I guess, as little bite as I can here, just to try to shave this handle smooth. But you know, when you want, you can really get in there and hog some wood. So you kind of get the that advantage when you want it, that Scandi can just dig in and really take some nice chunks of wood. Now the T4, like all TFK knives at this point, is D2 tool steel, which I very much enjoy. Now TFK is coming out very soon with some other knife steels such as N690, which I also do like. I do prefer D2 in general, so I think they were wise to start with D2 tool steel. It's performed extremely well so far in all my tests amongst all of their models, and that is also the case here with the T4. So again, just a great steel overall. Gives you the benefits of some carbon steels, yet at the same time it is quite stainless, so not too much in the way of rust or tarnish. All right, so Brandon's asking me about these shingles. What do you want to do with these?
I don't know, just make curls.
You want to try to mess around?
Shave it.
All right, so you want to shave it. So the edges sometimes are harder to use, but once you get it split till you get a good edge, sometimes that'll go easier. So I'm going to use this TFK knife here, right? Watch this. You can stab through it and basically pop it apart, right? And that'll give you a good edge to really work on. So sometimes you can use a knife like a splitting tool. So see, different knives, see how this has a good strong tip? Goes right through it.
Like mine?
Well, yours is very thin, right? So here, this is, see that Mora? How it's very thin?
Yeah, mine's a little thinner.
Right? It is thinner, but hold on, let's try it and see how it'll do. It should be able to do this too. And I always put my thumb on the top so that my hand doesn't accidentally slide.
Like you just do it with this.
Right, now you see this knife, right? This Mora, this has a finger guard. So it protects your finger so that it doesn't accidentally slide down. But see my knife here, this TFK, right? It has just a tiny little finger guard, and that's kind of slick. So you really need to be careful when you use this that your hand doesn't accidentally slide down the blade. So that has a very small finger guard there. It's not quite as big as some other blades like this one. See how that's a nice size?
This one's better.
Yeah, this has a nice size.
It's like safer.
A little safer, right? Okay, ready? Split it and then twist. Bam. And getting back to the stabbing tasks, you'll see that this T4 has a very stout tip. They did a nice job carrying the grind all the way down to the front of the blade, and then when it kind of converges with that Scandi grind, you do end up with a nice stout tip. So in terms of general stabbing tasks, this knife does have a beautiful penetration, nice and stout. I have no concerns about the tip of this knife breaking. In fact, here you'll see I'm able to pry into this log with certainty that the tip of this is not going to break. So, like other TFK knives, this D2 tool steel is performing extremely well, has a nice heat treat, and I definitely trust it. Look at that. Bam. So as I was mentioning, this does have just a little bit of a finger guard. It's not overly sized. So when you are gripping the knife, it actually gives you just it gives you a nice purchase, but for those stabbing tasks, you definitely want to be a little bit careful just to avoid your hand running down the blade. And I always find that for me, putting my thumb on the top of the knife is definitely helpful. Now, in that regard, this does have just a little bit of an edge on it. So if you're doing extended a prolonged period of stabbing tasks, that might wear into you, and it's not exactly sharp, but it is very pronounced and has a hard edge. Now it gives it a very nice look on the back of the knife. I like the way that looks. You could get away with a little more flair here, and actually if you look at their T2 model, the T2 does have a little bit more of a flair, but overall I do think the handle has a pretty nice shape. Now, even though it's just a touch on the blocky side, I find that overall it is actually quite comfortable in my hand. So the knife grips well. It's a nice size in terms of the overall length of the handle, and so my hand grips it very well. Now I have basically a large size hand, and this handle is plenty long, so good, comfortable overall ergonomics on this T4. Now the back of the spine is quite sharp and should do an ample job scraping. Here you'll see, trying to get on some of this bark. It's doing a decent job. I think it feels sharper than it acts in a way, but no, it's getting in there. Just taking a little bit to get me started. So you'll see that the back of this spine is definitely capable of doing some pretty decent scraping tasks. So in terms of the spine of the knife and its ability to strike a ferro rod, I just have a little tinder quick here that I've kind of fluffed out. So I'm going to use this here, strike the ferro rod. Oh, it's already going. So quite easy, worked with ease, and that is already on fire. Let's just do a little bit of splitting here. I mean, the reality of this is that this knife is not able to span anything of really substantial size, and this is probably more than it should be taking on, but let's just give it a quick try and see how it does. Whoop. I mean, that definitely handled it pretty easily. Did a nice job splitting the wood right in half, and definitely gave me the ability to kind of take care of this right now. So let's try that again. Let me hammer on this tip a little bit, and that'll be another good indication of the quality of the heat treat. No problem at all. I mean, hammering right down through there, no problem at all. I was doing a little bit more carving here. What I find about this T4 is that with this Scandi grind and the 5/32 stock, you get a great grind angle. It's a little less aggressive than, say, for example, a 3/16 spine, so you are able to really get a good, easily found angle and feel on this knife right away. And I find that sometimes that's not necessarily the case with a 3/16 spine on a Scandi grind. So overall, just my ability to really kind of get on the edge and do the work I'm looking to perform is quite easy. And then if I want to tailor it back just a little bit and get some nice, tight, refined, and controlled curls, I can just dial it back, take my time, and just ride that blade right down the wood ever so slightly, and just get these nice, tight, little, fine curls right down to the bottom of this piece of wood. Then again, if I want to get a little more aggressive, I can just hog this stuff right out, no problem. Look at that. So all in all, I feel like this TFK T4 performed quite well out here in the field. Now, at this point, after a bunch of use, let me get this thing cleaned up, and we'll take it inside, and we'll talk just a little bit more. Now, what turned me on to TFK early on was their high quality blades for a reasonable price. In other words, giving me an extremely high value. So this T7 just has beautiful lines, nicely finished, nicely etched,
has a little bit of jimping here. The way they ground the blade, just beautifully, nicely finished on the G10. Has these liners that are just kind of popping off there. Little detail with a hollow pin, nicely sort of fluted handle. So overall, just a beautiful piece. Same with this Pico. So having these in my hands, I'm like, wow, these guys really know how to finish their blades and really pull off a beautiful looking product. Now where these are handmade, that's even more impressive. So I'm like, wow, you know, I would really love to see more of the TFK products. And that is why I continued to buy more TFK knives. So taking a look at this T4, my initial question was, is it going to have the same quality as that T7 and the Pico? So as I get into this, it has many of the same sort of features, has that D2 tool steel, the etching, like the other blades, has the G10 handles, similar pins, even though a slightly different shape. Now these are not fluted, but there are models that have the sort of hollow fluted pins. Again, similar in terms of the overall size of the handle and the overall way that the scales have been shaped. Now, the first thing is there are some minor differences in the finish. Basically, the blade has been, for the most part, finished the same way, this being actually a Scandi grind, where the other ones are more of a saber grind, so you get a little bit of a difference there, but the edge is equally refined on all their blades. So they've done a wonderful job with grinding the steel, finishing this off, etching everything very nicely. The work that they've done on their edges and polishing the edge and getting it really, really sharp out of the box, they have done an excellent job. Now on this model, you'll see that the T4 does not have any liners. None of their T4 models have liners. Now, personally, I think I like the liner look. I think every knife doesn't necessarily have to have it, but I do prefer it. I think it just gives it a little more pop, a little more sort of, I don't know, just some style. And so, personally, I do like to have the liners. So I would like to see them offer these with liners in the future. I think it gives it just a little more style and kind of color options for people who like to have something that's a little more personalized. Now, one of the things that kind of caught me by attention is that it looks to me as though on this G10, it may have been, I don't know, in the machining process or the hand finishing process, if it was heated maybe a little bit too far. The G10 on this particular model is a little bit on the dull side. So just a little bit of an issue in terms of the overall finish. Now, when you talk fit and finish, the fit on this is beautiful. The handles are exactly matched to the thickness of the spine, so you have no sort of burrs or no sharp edges and nothing like that. Everything's been well rounded, so the fabrication is beautiful overall. I just think just a little more time and effort to getting that G10 nice and polished up, or at least smooth, is definitely worth the time and effort. Now overall, you'll see that the shape of the handles on this T4 varies quite a bit from the Pico and the T7, and that's cool. I do like it. I think it fits my hand overall very well. I have a large size hand, and this fits in my hand nicely, so no issues there. But overall, like I said, just a little bit of a difference in the shape. Now, for something like a Bushcraft knife, personally, I would like to see maybe just a little bit of a fluting in the hand, something to kind of fill it out a little bit so that like palm swell, where your hand kind of needs to grip. But I can say that after a good amount of use with this blade, I did like it and it felt pretty nice overall. Now, another one of the features that attracted me heavily to the TFK knives was their leather work. Here you'll see the sheath that came with my T7. They did a beautiful job forming the sheath, wet forming it so that the knife just fits beautifully and locks into this. So their leather work had me very happy. I was extremely happy with the outcome, how nice this was, how well it was put together, the quality of the stitching and rivets and just everything about it. And I was hoping that I would see a very similar sort of detail on their Kydex. However, probably my biggest knock with this T4 is the Kydex sheath. This is, in my opinion, sort of underdone. I feel like this Kydex is on the thin side. They should have used thicker Kydex. And then the other thing is undersized rivets. And then even at that, they are not necessarily even uniformly laid in here. So I feel as though this sheath is a little bit lacking. I would like to see thicker Kydex Also more of a defined thumb ramp. So if you look at the knife here, as it is inserted, there is no defined thumb ramp. Now that doesn't necessarily matter too much. The retention is okay at best. In fact, if I was to shake this, I am fairly certain that the knife would fall out of here. So the retention is okay, but not great, and you can't trust it as a single means of retention. You do really need to rely entirely on the snap and closure, so that's a little bit of a downfall. Then the undersized rivets do not allow for anything like a tech lock to be mounted on here, and where this webbing is basically riveted onto the back of the sheath, you are pretty much stuck with this in its configuration as it is sent to you. Now the more difficult part for me is the fact that you do rely entirely on this snap to hold the knife into the sheath. But even furthermore, because of the way that this is developed, you'll see here that I have it mounted on my belt. As soon as I undo that snap, the knife becomes very unstable. So without too much difficulty, the knife will flop around. And so you really need to ensure that this snap is snapped all the time. So when you're using it in the field, it's very impractical, because now here I am. I want to be using my knife off and on. I put my knife back in the sheath, start to walk around, and before you know it, the thing flops around. So that means every time I put the knife back in the sheath, I'm going to have to take the time to put the snap on, and for me, that's just not practical. So this design, in my opinion, just simply does not work. All right, so there you have it. A quick look at this T4 from TFK, Tanev Family Knives. So what do I think about it? Well, I have to say, first and foremost, I am very happy and pleased with the quality of TFK in general. I know that they have a lot of skills, especially after seeing the T7 and the Pico. These two blades really turned me on to TFK, and after handling them and using them for a long period of time, I have to say they are extremely high quality, and I am quite impressed. My general thoughts about the T4 is that I do like it. I think it has good quality steel. Their D2 work is excellent. So overall, just excellent steel, and I like that. I think the handle is, for the most part, pretty comfortable. It works well for me. I think it should work pretty well for most people. Now, to wrap up my final thoughts, really, I think, as I had mentioned, that TFK should spend a little bit more time on some of these, call them mid-quality blades. I think they really definitely, they have the tools in the box to give you a nice high-end blade. And my own personal opinion is that I'd rather spend a little bit more money to get some of the higher finishes, higher-end sort of quality, than to be more in a mid-priced or budget blade. Now, not that this is budget, it's certainly kind of in that mid-range, but my opinion is that they should just put a little bit more time, a little bit more effort into the finishes on these blades and get them up into that premium range. So, alright guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.